That one you uncensored. Anywhere in the world it uncensored. Pure music, news, interviews on the topic uncensored. Everybody does I love this real bad. We go all out and done. We go all out. We go all out and done. We go all out. We go all out and done. Party till night come down. Here we go all out. We go all out and done. We go all out. We go all out and done. We go all out. We go all out and done. Party till night come down. I would girl them a few. Hanging off interview. I want to heap of them not a few. Every step in my shoe is something new. Them calling them friends and them crew. Earlier that one I run with like a road taxi. It uncensored, call the paparazzi. And it up in your face like acne. Not even stop sign can't stop me. That one you uncensored. Anywhere in the world it's uncensored.
Welcome to this week's episode of Uncensored. We are in the height of our political season, and boy, we have lots to talk about today. If you are in New York, if you're in Brooklyn particularly, we have some key players who are making their names known. One of them is sitting with us today. Welcome, Mr. Brian Cunningham.
Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
I'm well.
Good.
So, if you guys didn't know, Mr. Cunningham is, or will be, running for, you are running for City Council.
Yes, in the 40th Council District in Brooklyn.
Wow. Wow. This is very exciting.
Very.
So, were you born in Brooklyn?
Born and raised in Brooklyn.
Wow.
Born in East Flatbush.
Okay.
My mother migrated here to America from Jamaica in the 1970s.
Wow.
She was deceived. She thought she was coming to a country with the streets that were covered with gold.
Wow.
They were paved with snow. So she did not understand how cold it was, but she knew the country had a lot of opportunities. She moved initially to the Bronx and then found her way in Brooklyn eventually. So we've been in Brooklyn my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
East Flatbush particularly.
East Flatbush, that's what's up.
Yeah.
Okay, so similar to me, I'm an East Flatbush girl too.
What part of East Flatbush?
I don't want to tell you because, you know, I might have some stalker situations going on. Anyway,
Got it.
On a serious note, you are here with us because you are running for City Council.
Yeah.
And many of us don't know. I know a little bit. I know that the City Council are the people who really navigate throughout our city's agencies and say, hey, this is where this money should go.
Yeah.
Show us how you're using this money. You know, so many different aspects. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that entails?
So the City Council, there are 51 members in the New York City Council, right? And the New York City Council is essentially the checks and balance for the mayor. A lot of people understand the president, they understand the governor, they understand the mayor. What folks don't know is that there's a legislator, right, on every level of government. So whether you be in the city, that's the City Council. In the state, you call it the state legislature, the Assembly, the Senate. And in the federal government, you call it Congress, either a member of the House or a member of the Senate. Yeah. The City Council's function is twofold. One, to pass a budget, right? So the city of New York has an $80 billion budget, not million, $1 billion budget. Yeah. In context, that's the fourth largest budget in the entire country. Wow. So you have the federal government, the state of California, the state of New York, and then the city of New York. So our budget is larger than 48 other states, right? So we're in charge of passing that budget. The role of a member is to pass legislation and pass the budget. And when you talk about the budget, there are twofolds, right? So there's getting money into the budget, money into education, money into streets and pavements and stuff like that. The other part is really getting money into your district, right? So in East Flatbush, it's 89% a district with 53% Caribbean Americans, right? 55% of women, right? So for us, trying to figure out what the budget priorities for those groups are and making sure we get those monies into the schools, into all the things that people find important and being a voice in the legislature for those people. Wow.
So how often, you know, we know that we elect our president every 4 years. How often are council members voted?
Council members are voted in every 4 years.
Every 4 years as well.
So, and they're voted on, the best way to remember it is it's an odd election cycle, odd year cycle. So 2017 is the next election year, then 2021 and 2025. So I'll actually be on the ballot, not this year with the presidential election, but next year. On the 2017 cycle. When people vote for the mayor, they'll be voting for all 51 members of the City Council as well.
Okay, so good. We want to encourage our viewers to keep looking at you and see what you stand for.
Absolutely. They could follow me at Beyond the Issues on Facebook and Twitter and also on Instagram.
good. We'll be keeping an eye.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what are some of the current issues.
Yeah.
So we know election is a couple of days away.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have these grand candidates who ultimately will make a difference in all of our lives,
Sure.
but particularly people of Caribbean heritage.
Absolutely.
What do you see happening either way? How do you see this affecting us on either side?
I mean, so one of the things I think we've learned from the last 8 years with President Obama's election is that electing a president is really, really important, right? It's
Definitely.
how the global stage looks at and judges America's character by who their leader is. You kind of set the bar for how America is going to be viewed on a world stage.
Yes.
But people, again, just to go back to the first part about legislators, we're also voting for members of the Senate, right?
Yes.
There's 100 members of the United States Senate. There are over 400 members of the House of Representatives.
Right.
Those folks are also on the ballot this year, as well as our state legislators.
Right.
So I think as people vote for president, obviously there are two big names on the top of the ticket.
Yes.
But I don't want folks to misunderstand the importance of down ballot voting as well and making sure they have the right representation.
Right.
However their policies are that represent your views and your opinions. But this is a major year. You have housing in terms of state laws on the agenda and the ballot.
Yeah.
A place like New York City,
Yeah.
where the housing cost is enormously high. In fact, Brooklyn is now the most expensive place in the country to live, followed by Manhattan, which is second.
Wow.
And then Queens is number 5 on the list. So out of the top 5,
We
New
have
York City
3.
has 3. So
Wow.
when we vote for a president, we have to look at members of the House, members of the Senate, and also members of the state legislature who are actually advocating for housing that we can afford.
Wow. Myself and one of our other hosts, Michelle Chusang, we were having a conversation just about this, of how important it is to get people like yourself in.
Yeah.
To go and vote for the council members as well.
Yeah.
You know, we often just pay attention to the presidential election and not knowing that people like yourself, you are the ones who really doing the work for the little people like us.
No, sure. I mean, you know, you come home every day, right?
Yes,
You live in these
yes.
areas. But we won't underestimate the role of the president, right? In terms of, we have some major things in terms of, when you look at America, America is a country founded on the backs of immigrants, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about a pathway to citizenship for a lot of people who are living in the shadows, as they call it, people who have their green card for years but haven't gone to apply for citizenship, having somebody on the presidential level who's echoing comprehensive immigration reform and making sure that people come out of the shadows is very important, because if a president is talking about it, it's getting worldwide attention, and that means legislators are paying attention and they'll begin to vote in those kind of ways. So I think it's really important to have somebody who's pro-immigrant, particularly when you look at America. America was built on immigrant labor, immigrant workforce. Our communities are comprised of immigrants. No one in this country can say they were born in America fully, right? If you look back 1, 2, or 3 generations, somebody came through Ellis Island, somebody came on a boat, somebody came on a plane, somebody came in a way they shouldn't have come but are trying to get on the straight and narrow. But we all come from an immigrant background, so it's really important.
Well, let's talk about one piece that you mentioned there, which is people who have migrated here, who have their green card, but either, let's say they don't think they can make any dent in the outcome. I've heard people say, you know what, I'm not going to vote because my one vote doesn't matter. What do you think about that?
So to your first point, there are a lot of programs. First of all, CUNY has a great program called Citizenship Now. And Citizenship Now is a program, in fact, one of my former bosses and mentors, Senator Kevin Parker, had a Citizenship Now event at the Flatbush YMCA, where I sit on the board. And what they do with Citizenship Now is they take people with green cards and people that they're not sure their status, and they have lawyers who provide free service to kind of go through these services with you and figure out what your status is, if you can apply for a pathway to citizenship. So I want to just have people think about that program. It's called CUNY Citizenship Now.
CUNY Citizenship Now.
Yeah. Okay. It's an outstanding program. These are attorneys. These aren't scam artists. These are real attorneys that are working hard to help people get on track with their paperwork and find a legal pathway to citizenship. So a lot of folks who can't vote, get your citizenship and get voting. The second part is when people talk about their vote doesn't matter. Votes have major implications, right? When you talk about just from the standpoint of communities that vote get paid attention to.
Exactly.
Right? So if you don't vote, people don't know you live there, right? So voting and the censor, the United States censor that's taken every 10 years, are two important indicators of where money from the federal government pours in to local communities. If you don't vote, people don't know those people exist, they don't know they're there, and therefore federal dollars that will be helping subsidize some of the shortfalls of our income aren't really pumped into those communities. So it's really, really important that people vote. It's not just a vote for a person, but it's a vote to have your voice echoed on a federal, state, and local level.
It's so funny because you think of those envelopes that come from the census that comes to your house, and people either open them, they look, they fill it out and send it back, or they throw it in the garbage, or they don't even respond to it. And again, that's just like what you're saying. How do they pay attention to us if they don't even know that we're there, that we exist? So it's so important for us to get this message out. Are there any other platforms that you think people of all kinds, not just Caribbean people, could walk into and get more information?
Well, I think beyond voting, I think one of the things I always say is that voting is one way to start the engagement process. But I think beyond that, it's really staying engaged throughout the entire process. Oftentimes we pull a lever, and we return to our corners for the next 4 years or the next 2 years, and we never do anything about it again. We never write our legislators, we never talk to them about issues that are affecting our communities. I think it's critically important that people advocate and stay on top of their legislators. People will do what you allow them to do. So if you vote someone in and they've been in office for 10 years, and all they do is show up to the ribbon cutting, but when you reach out to their office and you ask for real constituent services because you have a real issue and you're not getting a response, that's problematic. And with those folks can't afford to stay in office, so you have to be engaged constantly on those issues. And I think that's one thing that people should definitely do, is always advocate for the things that are important to you.
I agree. I think it's twofold. You know, people say, oh, we only see this person when it's election time, and then we don't see them again. What are you doing to engage them? What are you doing to bring them into our communities?
Call them out.
Call them out. So you are, hopefully, we hope, on the way in, right? So tell us, what about you will be different, better than the last?
I think one of the things that, so let me backtrack a little bit and talk about how I got into politics. I think that's an important segue to talk about what I'll do differently.
Definitely.
Because the best predictor of someone's future actions, their past actions. So before I got into government, this was not really something I wanted to do. It's not something that when I grew up, I said, I want to be a politician, or I want to, those are always dirty words. And, you know, in Caribbean communities, like, politicians. They're liars, they don't tell the truth. You know, I used to work in youth services. I was a youth service counselor in high schools. I worked for kids who were over age for their grade level, or undercredited. They call them opportunity youth. There are about 5.5 million youth like that in the country that need a shot, need to get a boost to get going again. I worked there for a couple of years, and every year what I would see is budget cuts. Every year the budget would get cut. So I started off, when I first started, as an administrative assistant. By the end of my first year, they said, oh, your job title doesn't exist anymore, so we have to get rid of you. But they had another job, because I did a good job, so they found a job for me. And every year I would see these budget cuts. And I wanted to find out who made decisions on budget, right? Going back to that earlier point about $80 billion, more than 48 of the states, but we can't provide living wage jobs for people. Problematic, right? And I found out that was elected officials, so I began to intern after work and volunteer for elected officials. One year, one of my mentors called me and said, I want you to run my campaign. I ran this campaign, got really excited about the possibilities of what politics can do, realizing that politics and policy, really policy, not politics, can really change the course of people's lives, change the course of people's existence, help rebuild communities, and help create a systemic wave of change and not just fixing one-off situations. So then I started working in government. I worked in the state legislature for a little bit. I worked in the city council. And I came to this conclusion that I thought the most effective way to use my giftings, my skills, my experience was to work as a legislator in the city council. One, because I got to go home every night. I got to see my community every day. And I got a chance to really help fund organizations that are doing great work and pass legislation that's progressive and that could help enhance the quality of lives of people. So some of the things that I'm really focused on is obviously youth development. I've worked for my Brothers Keepers Alliance, President Obama's big initiative to save boys and men of color throughout the country. I'm really concerned about our aging population. People like my mother who came here in the 1970s, worked hard their entire lives. For part of my mom's tenure here, she was a domestic worker. She wasn't on the books, right? Like so many Caribbeans. And you know, when she got her citizenship, got on the books. But now, with the cost of living rising in New York, right, and wages not going up, as a millennial, right, somebody in that bracket, I now have to worry about my own family, my wife, and our future children, but also have to worry about how my mother's gonna survive in New York, right? So aging populations concern me, youth populations concern me, the housing crisis when people can't afford to live and you have 3 or 4 people living in 2-bedroom apartments concerns me. People not having a living wage concerns me. So there are a number of issues that we want to look at differently. And part of what my Twitter handle is, beyond the issues, is really the idea, let's move beyond these issues and start finding solutions for these problems. And I feel like I want to help offer some of those solutions, not because of my own intellect, but because I sit down at tables like this every day with families and I listen to their problems. But when they're talking about their problems, they're also giving us solutions. So I want to turn some of those solutions to legislation.
Okay. I see you on the campaign trail as well. I've been watching. I see you on the campaign trail, so I know who you're backing, but we won't talk about that. But so, you know, a candidate which I support as well, we can't really talk about. But tell me, as you are going from state to state, from city to city, are you hearing some of the same issues, same concerns? And are there these Caribbean communities within these states that you're going to that are bringing these concerns to the front?
I think one of the things I'm hearing from state to state as I travel the country, you know, is immigration reform. It's one of those things that have not really been addressed over the last 8 years. And there's a lot of great things the president did with healthcare reform, with restorative justice for a lot of folks who are incarcerated. But this Congress was determined not to allow him to have a conversation about the restorative justice for immigrants and that pathway to citizenship. So I think that's something that I'm hearing, no matter when I'm in Chicago, when I'm in Pennsylvania, when I'm in Oakland. And there are different pockets of immigrants, right? There's the Caribbean American experience. There's the Latino immigrant experience. There's the Muslim American experience. But everywhere you go, this conversation about this unfinished business of immigration reform is hitting a chord with me in particular.
So do you think, and maybe this is just me and maybe I'm biased because I have Caribbean heritage, that immigration really doesn't pay attention to our issues as Caribbeans? We do pay attention to the Latino concern. We pay attention to the European immigrant concern. And are we way behind on this list of people who we need to pay attention to?
That's a great point. There was an argument about a year ago or 2 years ago that a colleague had made that the Black voice in immigration, the Caribbean voice in immigration needs to be amplified. Because when you talk about the dreamers, when you talk about immigration, oftentimes folks paint this picture that we're just talking about immigrants from that speak Spanish. Right? When you hear the rhetoric against immigrants, it's the rhetoric against building structures to keep people out. But the reality is, their fight is our fight. And when people who don't consider themselves immigrants, the other, right? Folks who can kind of hide behind the mask of color or whatever the case is, the conversation isn't directed in one direction. And we have to identify those xenophobes. We have to identify those people who are bigots and people who use discriminatory language towards any immigrant population. Because while they're not necessarily saying Caribbean Americans, are saying Trinidadians or Jamaicans or Guyanese, there is an undertone that attack also is an attack on us. So we have to also engage ourselves in that fight and be more mindful of it, that they're not just, it's coded, it's very coded language.
Very coded. And, you know, I sit around my Caribbean brothers and sisters and they're like, well, they're not talking about us. They're building that wall for Mexican Americans. And I'm like, you better pay attention because we definitely fall right in
into the pocket. And
in that conversation.
You look at it like in 2001 after 9/11, Muslim Americans were attacked. You look at in the 1960s, you go back and back, you'll always find a pocket of a group who was marginalized. And if we're not careful with how they're currently treating our Mexican brothers and sisters, our Chicanos, then we're going to find ourselves in the next 2, 4, 8 years having to defend ourselves against these similar attacks. That they're going to build walls around the Caribbean Sea and all kind of ridiculous rhetoric.
When they talk about the they, they're really talking about us, right? And we really need to pay attention to that on all ends.
And we need to, and quite frankly, like I say to people from the South all the time as well, my brothers from the South, is that when they see us, they just see color. So an attack on, it's just an outright attack. A lot of, you had a lot of racist rhetoric this election cycle, a lot of anti-woman and gender rhetoric this cycle, a lot of,
I mean, I can remember going to college in Maryland, and because I wasn't Black American, right? So I was automatically Jamaican, right? Because they look at you, never taking the opportunity to find out who you are, where you're from, and what's going on. And many times that's what's happened. We're all thrown into one basket.
And how our stories are connected, but they're different experiences, right?
Definitely.
And one of the things that we talked about even when Hurricane Matthews was ripping through the Caribbean and started ripping through the South, is that it reminded us of our common human nature. That it didn't matter whether you were Black in the Caribbean or Black in the South or Mexican. You were affected by this tragedy. And I like the fact that we come together around tragedy, but I wanted to stay together beyond tragedy.
Yeah. What do you think about, again, this height of this political season and particular candidate who is blatantly disrespectful to people of color, and so many other things that as I talk about it, it just brings up so much because I think there's so many of us who do the same. We get up, we work, we learn, we foster our children, we take care of other family members, whether it's in the Caribbean or right here. You talk about the elderly. You know, we have so many issues with adolescents and elderly, of people taking their lives. And sometimes the Caribbean people are saying, oh, that's not us. Oh, yeah, that's us. So many different issues. And when we have a candidate like this who's saying, I'm going to represent all of you, but I don't even respect you. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's obviously very, very concerning. I think one of the things that we have to look at, again, like I'm just looking at my district in Brooklyn alone, 53% of the people that live in that district weren't native to New York, right? So I feel like, and majority, 89% are African American, are Black, not African American, Black. Let's put it like that, right? So there is a major concern that this is an attack on us, right? And that we have to band together and really have have some policy agenda, the things that we want to see happen for the Caribbean Americans, particularly those who live in the United States.
So, I mean, you know, I hear people saying, oh, this one candidate is good, this one is not as good, but we'd rather go there. As Caribbean people, I think our concerns always are, if we're here and we don't have status, we do work still, we do pay our bills, you know, how do you think either candidate going in is going to affect what happens in these Caribbean communities?
I mean, again, I think one of the things the president underscored recently was that the president of the United States is not just the president of the United States. He's considered the world leader, right? He's the most powerful person, he or she is the most powerful person on the planet. And we've seen how interventions for other groups through funding, through policies, have helped raise and elevated those groups. Again, I go back to the idea that the Caribbean needs a Caribbean agenda, right? You look at what's happening in the Caribbean right now, just in Jamaica, Trinidad, and Haiti, you have 3 new prime ministers who are on the world stage who are also world leaders that came in between last year and this year. I think we need to have a coalition of things that are important. I mean, one of the things that I talk about all the time with my team is the fact that we have a lot of money that we make here in America and we end up sending back home. I would like to see, people talk about Black banks and banking in general. I'd like to see a Caribbean bank, something here in Brooklyn that we can help with the exchange rate and help with the stock. There's a Caribbean exchange rate. Just really tying together the e-commerce. Also the healthcare system, right? There are things that in terms of older folks who live back home who don't get the sufficient healthcare coverage they need or services they need. My wife's grandmother, God bless her, died 5 years ago. She was here in the States, went back home, because the hospital systems weren't as advanced with some of the technology, and because they were in that part of Jamaica, Alexandria, the closest hospital was an hour away.
Wow.
She ended up dying en route to the hospital. So those are things that if I'm paying my taxpayer dollars here, and I see the country sending money overseas to other parts of the world to help develop those nations through war or through whatever, or through direct aid, I feel like we need to have some of that direct aid hit the Caribbean as well.
Wow. You know, I've lived in East New York, my parents in Canarsie, and friends that I have that lived in Crown Heights. And, you know, we'll sit and talk about what are some of the services that we see happening within their neighborhood. So when people who are non-Caribbean immigrants that are coming in, they have this service, this welcoming that they get when they get here. So if it's a package of clothing, if it's a package of resources, if it's a package of, hey, this is where you're going to be housed for this short term until you get on your feet. And as the community or wherever the funds are coming from, this is being taken care of for them. Why isn't that happening for us?
And it can.
Back to.
It can. It goes back to leadership.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of folks who are elected who hail Caribbean heritage, but don't do enough to elevate and amplify those voices when they're sitting at the table of the legislature. And that's something that I plan on doing when elected, quite frankly, is really elevating the voice of Caribbean people, elevating the voice of diaspora, figuring out ways that our $80 billion budget can help affect those who are living here. And because when their bottom line is affected and they're seeing an uptick in their wages, that's more resources they can take care of their business here and their business back home. With the cost of living so high being here, a lot of folks, when you send money back home, that means missing a months of rent here, right? And that means being evicted. And that there's a number of systemic problems. So this whole idea of living wages, the whole idea of the fight for 15 with some of the unions, these are really big critical issues that we have to really look at. These local issues affect how we interact with the diaspora back home.
Wow. I don't know. These candidates have a grand job,
They have a
grand
big job
task to come. You have a grand task. I see you moving and shaking and really addressing some issues by just engaging. You know, I think it's important for people to know that as we engage within our communities and for others who may not have what we have, and we may not have that much, but if we can lend that as Caribbean people back to our young people so that they can model some of this, I think is so important. Do you see, is there a person who you think modeled some of that for you that also was a part in you stepping
Listen,
up?
that whole "it takes a village" model is a real model. My mother, when she got here again in the 70s, she just knew America had opportunities. She didn't know where the opportunities were, she just knew they were here. My mother moved on Linden Boulevard. Our church was on Lenox and Nostrand.
Wow.
And as a kid growing up, I thought I'd be a pastor because I went to church 6 days a week. I didn't go to church on Saturday because I was doing grocery shopping and laundry. But literally, I had Friday night youth service, Wednesday night Bible study, Sunday morning 2 services. I got my start working and speaking and teaching and being a Sunday school teacher in church. I was a youth leader in church. But that whole church model, particularly growing up without a father in the home, was critical. That's why I played basketball. That's why I went to after school programs. We didn't have money. We didn't have resources. All we had was whatever the church could provide, right? So a lot of the mentors in the church, a lot of men, are the reason why I'm able to exist, which is why I like mentorship, youth development, are huge critical components to me. I know that it's a thing that has kept me, right? Those guys who taught me how to shave, even though I don't shave much these days, but teaching me how to shave, teaching me how to open doors, teaching me how to play ball and be physically fit and how to treat people and how to speak. So I can never underscore the importance of support services, the YMCA, having somewhere to go. But those services are important and mentors are critical. Like young people who have mentors really do better because it's an accountability system and people who care about you. And I had a lot of mentors, a lot.
Wow. I have worked in the foster care system many moons ago. And, you know, there's an understanding that people who are from here, this is something that happens. When our Caribbean people fall into being in this foster care system, the young people, it's different. It's very different.
It's funny, back home in Jamaica, we never, my mother, she can't wrap her head around a foster care system because when a parent died or something happened to a parent, they came and lived with you, right? Like aunts,
Automatically.
uncles, people stepped up. And I just feel like, again, going back to the unaffordability of New York City and how it's becoming more and more unaffordable, to take another person in your house to take on another bill, really,
Yes.
and that's what that's why we got to change that affordability and make sure that living wages are a part of the ongoing conversation, because
Definitely.
it's tough. But we never knew foster care. We just knew that people came together and you take care of each other. You need a meal? If you need a meal today at 3 o'clock, my mother's serving dinner at home.
Yeah.
And anyone can come in. And that's how I learned, right? Over the table, over oxtail and rice and peas, is how we learned politics. We learned schoolwork. We learned everything at those tables, because my house was always that place.
Upscale and stylish dining has finally come to Southeast Queens. Panache restaurant, bar, and lounge brings the elegance and essence of Manhattan to the comfort and convenience of Queens. Panache is home to the one and only Eurosoul menu. Our Eurosoul menu consists of mouth-watering Mediterranean, Moroccan, Caribbean, and soul food-infused entrees, appetizers, and desserts made to order by our kitchen chefs. Join us after work at Panache. Our 25-foot full-service bar features 2 large state-of-the-art TVs. Try all of our delicious specialty cocktails created exclusively by our in-house mixologist.
I'm so glad that you're here with us today. Just sitting and talking about all of these issues really bring things to light, because many times we don't have the people who are going to have a hand in making changes for our entire city, our Caribbean people. Can you just give a word of advice to any Caribbean person out there who may be here, as we say, illegal, undocumented, who are here, maybe they're even documented and really haven't figured out where to go next?
Sure.
Give a word of advice to them, please.
So one of the things that I think people should look out for is CUNY Now.
Yes.
CUNY Citizenship Now. My apologies.
Okay.
Citizenship Now is a program that CUNY has to help undocumented people access status or a pathway to citizenship, rather, right? They have programs all the time throughout the entire city. Legal Services of New York. But beyond that, one of the great things that the Brooklyn DA did, the late, great Ken Thompson, Ken had a hotline for people who are undocumented to call in and report things. And they had pop-up clinics that popped throughout the city. I'm hoping that the current DA continues that trend, and I'm hoping that other DAs throughout the city also picks that up. But there are a number of legal services through Legal Services, Legal Aid, CUNY Citizenship Now, the DA's office through, again, Ken Thompson's work in his short time as DA of Brooklyn, did a lot of work to help elevate the voice of people who are living in the shadows, undocumented, and bringing them in to full citizenship. But Citizenship Now is definitely an outstanding program at CUNY, and I'm a former CUNY student, so I have to put that out there. But CUNY does great work around Citizenship Now.
What do you say to people who are afraid to go to programs like this? I know I've referred people to organizations like CAMBA, who has an immigration portion where you can go and sit down and get real life information about what you can do. What do you say about our Caribbean people who are afraid to step forward because they don't know if they give their information, if this means somebody will come knocking on their door?
Yeah, I think fear is a tool and a wedge that we've heard a lot in this election cycle, and it's kind of created an atmosphere where people are afraid to reach out for help. But I would say organizations like CAMBA, like CUNY, like the Brooklyn DA's office, like Legal Aid Services, like Legal Services in New York, these are reputable organizations who have a long track record going back years, really making sure that people got the services they need, got access to those services, and I don't know anybody I've recommended to those services who've had a knock on their door in the middle of the night, and we're rounded up and deported. These are great services. People should tap into it. I think oftentimes what happens in our community, the Caribbean American community, in the Black community, is that we wait until the 9th hour, right, to ask for help. And the 9th hour, oftentimes folks can't direct you in the right ways. But like you mentioned, CAMBA is an outstanding organization. I worked there. They've been around for 30 years. Legal Aid Services, the DA's office. And again, that hotline that the DA, that the late, great Ken Thompson had, was a unanimous hotline. So you can call there and you don't have to disclose too much information and get
just ask
access
general
and
questions.
So I would say ask for help.
So there's help out there.
There's
we
help.
Just need to know. And you know what? Don't be afraid. I would say you're a Caribbean person, you're undocumented. Pick up the phone and make a call. just ask questions.
Yeah.
You know,
And-
there
And
are
there's a
answers
resource,
out
and there's a
there.
resource guide on my website as well.
Okay.
So if folks want to check that out.
So
there's
before you
also a
go, you'll
resource
give
guide.
us
Yeah,
some of that
definitely.
information.
Yeah.
You are a Black man in politics, and you have a family, you're doing well, and even somebody like yourself can fall into all kinds of issues just because people might see you and just automatically think because of the color of your skin, you are something other than what you are. What advice do you give to a young Black Caribbean male who's here, who may be new here, or who's been here for a very long time and doesn't know where to go in their journey?
One of the things that I would strongly encourage for any person, but particularly for young Black men from the Caribbean just arriving here, is to find a mentor and find programs that work. One of the programs that I work with is called Young Movement. We have a program called FEEL, which is Financial Education, Entrepreneur, and Leadership. And we worked with a host of young men over the last few cycles at Weeksville Heritage Society over in Crown Heights. And we put together a real comprehensive program to help and identify who you are as a man, help you identify your skill sets, help develop your leadership abilities, and help identify you for help with internships and jobs. So I would definitely check out youngmovement.org. They are an outstanding source. I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of really working with them over the last, since 2008. And again, I can give you countless scores of young men's testimonials who've come through that program who have really received a helping hand, not a handout, but a hand up, and help them identify a great pathway. But find a mentor and definitely check out youngmovement.org. They're a great organization.
That's beautiful. I can attest to it that Caribbean families, parents will mentor you in having good manners, pushing you all the way to the top in your education, but the financial management, which is a grand piece,
important.
is poor in there, and it is so important.
And it's important to have voices that aren't just your parents. Like it doesn't minimize the voice of your parents,
importance,
right?
yes.
I think parents, particularly again, just looking at how I grew up. I grew up again in a single parent household. My mom didn't have a lot of resources. I didn't have a dad there, but I had really good men in my life who were able to redirect me in ways that my mom probably couldn't have because she's not a man, right? And there's certain experiences as a young man that you need another brother to talk to you about. So I would definitely advise that they find mentors.
So tell us, you know, we are going to see you in that councilman seat in 2017. What will we be expecting from you? What will you give back to our communities, our Caribbean community?
I think what you'll see from me is the same thing you've seen from me in the past. Again, someone's past is a good indicator of their future. Someone who's always advocated to enhance the quality of life for people, right? But particularly Caribbean Americans, because that is my heritage. You'll continue to see me be a voice for young people. Somebody who fights to make sure that we raise that college graduation rate in our district from 21% north. You'll see someone who's continually fighting for the aging population in our district who is being priced out of their homes and need health care services. You'll see someone who is constantly fighting to ensure that we have great living wage jobs and that domestic workers like my mother who came here in the 1970s are protected. You'll have someone who will not be quiet, silent, or dodge around the issues. You'll have a straight shooter. You know, Jamaicans, we believe in sometimes to talk too direct, but you have somebody who's there as a voice echoing those concerns. So that's what you can expect to see from me. What you see now is what you'll see then. That won't change because we need fighters. We don't need people that are going to sit down in the chamber and hide behind their titles or their chairs. We need people who are going to fight. And I think that's what we need. The Caribbean needs fighters, and we haven't had a fighter in that seat since Dr. Una Clark. And I'm trying to restore that fight that Dr. Clark had and that Yvette Clark had and restore that Caribbean seat as being a vocal seat for the Caribbean American community in Central Brooklyn.
So as people, you know, as you come forward and you'll be doing great things, we know, but we know also people will challenge what you're doing. And will you be open to answering some of those challenges? Because we know our current, you know, people running for office who don't like to be challenged, who don't like to answer questions. Will that happen?
Listen, you got to have thick skin
Yeah.
to have this job,
Yeah.
right? And certain things you just got to brush off, right? And
Yeah.
I think the most important thing you could do with people is explain to people. And I think far too often people don't do this, have these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
These are the things that we do every day. We sit down at tables, kitchen tables.
Yeah.
We sit down around boardroom tables, and we have conversations about what people are saying on the ground. So those same voices that I sit down with and have Sunday dinner with, or have coffee with, or talk to every day in the streets, are the same kind of voices I want to echo when I'm in City Hall.
Okay.
You know, the same voices of like a young man, Trinidadian young man from my neighborhood, Sean, who says, Brian, I see all these buildings going up in our communities, and I have 2 kids. I don't work on these job sites, and I can't afford to live there. Those are the voices that need to get echoed in City Hall. Those are the stories that need to be told. And those are stories that I plan to bring into City Hall, the stories of everyday working Caribbean people who live in this Flatbush. Again, 89%. It is a large concentration of people. It's the largest concentration of Caribbean people outside of Caribbean in East Flatbush, in the 40th Council District. And we need to echo those voices, we need to echo their concerns. Their concerns are the concerns of the city of New York.
Good. This is a call to action, people. We have a Caribbean representative who wants to represent us and represent us well. Let's go out, let's vote for councilmen, and we'll see you next year in our seat.
I'll see you before then.
All right,
Hopefully.
then. So before we go, you got to tell us, where can we find you?
You could find me at www.briancunningham.nyc.com, not .ja.com. Yeah, Jamaicans out there. But also you can find me at Beyond the Issues on Instagram, Twitter, and I think I'm on Snapchat too.
Good.
Yeah, I don't snap as much, but I'm on there.
Okay, thank you, Brian Cunningham. Thank you, Councilman Cunningham.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So thank you guys for sitting with us today on Uncensored. We know politics is hot. We're keeping our eyes on this prize, okay? We'll see you next time.
Interviews on the topic uncensored. Everybody does I love this real bad. We go all out, we go all out and done. We go all out, we go all out and done. We go all out, we go all out and done. Party till night come down. Here we go all out, we go all out and done. We go all out, we go all out and done. We go all out, we go all out and done. Party till night come down. How will the girl them a view? Hanging off interview. I want to heap on them, not a few. Every step in my shoe is something new. Them calling them friends and them crew. Earlier, that one I run with like a road taxi. It uncensored, call the paparazzi. Hand it up in your face like acne. Not even stop sign, can't stop me. That one you're uncensored. Anywhere in the world, it's uncensored.